Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm here today with Scott Jeffrey Miller. He's been on the show before and he's written lots of books. He's a highly sought after speaker, a moderator, and 8 times Wall Street Journal and Amazon bestselling author. He has been many things, but for 28 years, he's a Franklin Covey associate, serving as chief marketing officer and co-author of the book Parenting Wrong Turns Right. Lessons with his son Thatcher and Thatcher Ford Miller. Yes, he's 15, just turned 15, as a freshman at Judge Memorial Catholic High School. He loves tennis, or likes it at least, and his favorite pastime is doing nothing. If he could do it all day long, I'm sure he would. What 15-year-old wouldn't? And he is co-authoring this beautiful book published with his father. And we're going to talk all about this book, how it got written, why it matters, why is this book here for them together. And I want to welcome Scott back to the show. Welcome, Scott.
Azul, so kind. It blows my mind that my son's favorite pastime is doing nothing, because my whole career is like being super productive and busy. And I think I actually can learn a lot from him in many ways, including sometimes enjoying doing nothing.
That's right. That's what struck me. That's why I pulled it out of his bio. Like, I might be an antithesis of what Scott would hope for, but how ironic that our kids do what they do, right? So when this book, I've had you on the show before. It was such a wonderful conversation about your insights in the industry, the business that you've done. We'll talk more about your work and as a literary agent and the things you do in your company. But more importantly, I want to talk about why write a book about parenting at all. Not that we couldn't. You could easily do lots of ways to help people about parenting, but why write a book, especially one co-authored with your child?
Well, I think a couple of reasons. One, it's kind of what I know how to do, right? I mean, I like you, I podcast, but I don't know how to host a radio program per se, or write a Substack per se, or a television program. But I'm very comfortable in the book space. I am fairly established as a moderately talented writer. I only write nonfiction. I don't write fiction. I couldn't write fiction to save my life. But I also have found that my greatest insights in life have always come from reading from someone, whether it's, Stephen Covey or Kim Scott or Liz Wiseman or John Maxwell or Susan Cain, you name it, Seth Godin, Dan Pink, on and on and on. The most profound pieces of insight I've ever received and applied have always come from a book. Could be a whole book where just one line struck me and stayed with me. So it's the way in which I receive and implement wisdom. And it's the family business, right? So one of my dreams, if you will, I call it a dream, was to kind of have our three sons that are 10, 13, and 15 in the family business. I don't own a restaurant. I don't own a nursery or a gallery. So the best way to teach our sons about business was to be in the business. And so I invited our oldest son, Thatcher, to co-write this book with me on a topic that I struggle with, parenting. And it was a topic that he had some insights in because he deals with it every day. And so it's a fresh voice of both sides of the issue. He's by no means my sycophant. He wrote all his own words, and the editor read it long before I did. So it was a good combination, but also great for him, right? At the end of the day, this was a great way for our now 15-year-old son, who was 14 when he wrote it, to learn about taking nothing and turning it into something. Product development, marketing, promotion, the discipline of writing. What is a copy editor versus a developmental editor? What's a publicist versus a publisher? What are retailers? How do you make money on intellectual property? He's learned a lot. He could give a masterclass on writing and monetizing a book. So a variety of reasons that kind of confluenced together, if that's a word.
Yeah, that's great. I think it really struck me that your son wrote this with you, because I don't know if my kids have even read my books. I got to be honest. I don't make them read my books because it doesn't seem like the thing to do. But what I had experience doing is that when I was a teacher a while ago, every one of my 7th and 8th grade students that graduated with me were published authors. I made sure that we had their work out.
Wow.
So it's very familiar to me, because what I do is work with kids about the author mindset, which has everything to do with the message, who you're writing to, how do you get better, how do you edit, how do you take critique, how do you know you're on the right track, how do you know when to abandon things. These are really the craft of an author, less than the craft of publishing or writing in the sense of, like this is an essay for school. What would you say you took away writing with your son? I'm sure he'd have his own takeaways, but there's what you have planned and then what maybe comes up. Was this mostly your plan and he acquiesced, or like what was the negotiation like?
I love that you're asking this question early on, because it was a bit of a negotiation, right? I had an idea and I said, hey, son, I'd like to write a book about parenting. Would you like to co-author it? No. Okay. Well, tell me more. Well, it would take a lot of work, like hundreds of hours, and you'll be frustrated, and I'll give you lots of feedback. And at the end of this, in a year and a half or two, you'll have something that you can monetize, meaning we'll keynote speak on it, and we'll be able to sell books, and you'll have it as a resume item for college. And he's like, I'm in. And I painted the vision for him of what it could be like. I also painted the downside, right? There is going to be trolls. There is going to be people that are jealous, people that are going to be vitriolic against us. There's going to be social media hate. There's going to be people that, criticize me and criticize you. It's usually grounded in our courage, but their jealousy, their jealousy of our courage. And so I painted the whole picture for him. And there were ups and downs. I told you off air, my son and I saw a therapist, a coach, a week ago, because I wanted him to be prepared for the coming wave of negativity. There'll be lots of people that will call me a helicopter parent, or I forced my son to be an author, or I'm choosing my son's career. It's all nonsense, right? It's noise and distraction. And I'm teaching him, so is the therapist, on how to deal with the public eye, how to govern yourself, how to take feedback and receive it and act on it, or just leave it. And so there's a lot of insights and maturity that Thatcher is learning on living your life in a public eye. One of my favorite insights in the whole book is about the fact that, everybody now is subject to the public eye, whether you are a dentist or you're a beautician or, a restaurant host. Anybody can post their opinion of you anywhere online. And so you might as well get used to this, because that's not going away. So I'm not forcing my kids in the public eye. I've invited them to co-author a book, which is teaching them great project management skills. And if they choose to write more or speak more after that, that's their choice.
That's great. What lessons did you take away from the writing process that you weren't expecting?
Well, first came from this meeting with this therapist / coach a week ago. I was showing some frustration that Thatcher kind of wasn't doing his share, right, in terms of promotion. Because as you know, Azul, writing a book is 10% of the process. Launching a book is 90% of the process, right? And so I need Thatcher to co-appear on podcasts. I need him to prepare his keynotes, right? We have a half dozen keynotes planned already. The book launched yesterday, and he's got to do his share of practicing and developing the materials and promoting it on LinkedIn and things like that. And she reminded me, he's your son. He's not your business partner. He's your son. He's your 15-year-old son who has friends and needs to sleep and has downtime. And it kind of shook me out of, you're right. He's not my business partner. I'm not his boss. He's my co-author. I'm his co-author. But I had to remember, this is a lesson in parenting, not only a lesson in entrepreneurship. And so I have to manage my expectations around what his brain, like his prefrontal cortex, what his brain can contribute. And I've got to stop treating him like my 50-year-old partner. He's my 14, now 15-year-old son. And that's a lesson for me.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. What's interesting about any of this work, being an author already has its own challenges. Maybe you don't face them as much as others. People are sitting at, driving the car, listening to this or watching a YouTube, whatever they're doing. Their resistance is even just getting to writing, then find an agent or to promote or self-publish or whatever they're trying to do. And then by the time they get to promotion, their energy is zapped. That's probably what you're saying. It's like, it's a normal thing. Yeah. You know how to ride the waves. Most of us don't know that after writing the book that the hard part begins, right? Because the promotion part is the hard part, because you have to position your book. You have to prepare for trolls. You have to anticipate questions. You have to be ready to defend and or promote something despite what's happening in the world, right? That's another thing. Right. What do you feel like if you, and the publishing side, what makes this book sellable as a parenting book that other books didn't already cover?
Yeah, a couple of value props, if you will. One, it's co-written by a 15-year-old teenage son. I mean, this is a 104,000 word book. I mean, it's twice as big as any book I've ever authored. This is my eighth book, actually. So one, our 13-year-old son sat up in his room for 75 hours over the course of 9 months and typed out 30,000 words on his own volition. So this isn't just about, I'm a great parent, and if you just do what I do, your kids will be great. This is a book where a 14-year-old opines on some of the craziness that his dad did. I mean, in free reign. Like, I did not tamp down his opinions. Half the book is him disagreeing with me, saying, well, Dad, is this fiction or nonfiction? Because that story's not true. That's not how this happened. So if you want to get into the mind of a 14-year-old about sex and drugs and self-esteem and body image and peer pressure and friend groups and long-term thinking and regulating emotions, you hear 30,000 words from a very normal 14-year-old. That's the first value proposition. The second is, let me be very clear. Some of your listeners and viewers are going to like me less in about 30 seconds. I don't enjoy parenting, period. In fact, most days I dislike parenting. It was not my mission in life. It was not my calling in life. I got married at 41 to my now only wife. We've been married almost 16 years. She's about 12 years younger than I am. And so we had 3 boys in 5 years, mainly because my wife wanted children and I wanted what she wanted. And so I was a reluctant parent. I do not enjoy parenting. And this whole book is written, to your question, for parents who love their children but don't like parenting. And so it is people who are called to parenting, people who feel like parenting is their assignment from God or their creator. This book's not for you. Not for you. This is a book for all the other millions of us that find parenting fatiguing and exhausting and unrewarding and unrelenting and bankrupting and emotionally fatiguing. It's very vulnerable. It's going to turn some people off. It's appropriate. I never crossed the line. Half of it's about things I did that are insightful you might want to consider. And the other half are things you can read and say, good grief, is the guy crazy? Yeah, because my kids kind of drove me crazy. You have 3 boys in 5 years. It was a lot for me. Some of you have. So those 2 things, co-written by a teen and written by a dad who does not like parenting, but loves my children, I just believe those things can coexist. How to navigate that world is what this book is about.
Right. So I love this. Thank you for helping position that. So a lot of times people will come, ask me questions about publishing, about getting an agent, or I think they first take the path wrong because I think they're on the defensive path a little bit. Some are either on the defensive path thinking why everyone over there doesn't understand me or they don't know. And then there's the other path where everyone would love this. They would be happy to get this. And sometimes neither of those are true. And most times they're not. They're somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Publishers, traditional publishers are looking for, it's a business. They're looking for a book that's profitable. They're looking for they're looking for the author that will do the work. They're looking for a collaborator who sees this as a business opportunity as well. What do you say to people who are thinking about writing a book who might, they're like, I'm a parent, I have a cool, interesting parenting thing. I think I'll write a book about parenting. What cautions or things you have for them? Because you're able to easily say, here's the value proposition because you do this. What about somebody else? What could they think of if they're thinking about, I should write about this? Because they get told they should write a book and now they think they should.
Well, first of all, don't. No, that's not true. I love the idea of people thinking they should write a book. I think it has to be grounded in reality, right? So exactly, what is the circumstance? What is the exact situation in which you bring valuable information? And who are those people? Who are those readers? Where are they? Do they know you exist? Because I'm a literary agent. It's my full-time job, right? I have about 100 authors that are under representation. We publish books through traditional publishers, hybrid publishers, both bespoke publishing, independent publishing, every possible way. And whenever we get a book rejected from a publisher, it's almost always because we don't see a viable business for this book because the author's platform is too small. And so increasingly, authors have to have a platform. Most books are pushed until they're pulled. Most books are pushed out. So whether that is your Substack or your TikTok or your X or your Facebook or your LinkedIn, whether it's your podcast, your TV program, whether it's whatever it is you have to be able to have people find you and find your voice and fall in love with you. Your book is not for everyone. Your book is not for everyone. Your book is for what I would call your smallest viable market, not your largest viable market. Who is the first person who's going to read your book? What is her name? What is her birth date? What does she wear? What does she eat? What does she like? Where does she shop? And get that persona really clear, and then go out and find the second person and a third person. Make sure they are your evangelist and let it grow. I have so many stories of major people, like Tim Ferriss. I think he went through 45 rejections before the 4-Hour Workweek was published. You ask every author, and they'll tell you, oh my gosh, it was my 8th book that took off. Malcolm Gladwell, right? It was Blink, but he wrote 4 years after the tipping point. It was Blink, his second book, that ignited the tipping point from 4 years later. And he had millions of people reading his New Yorker columns for 2 decades. So you got to put in the rep. You show me a successful author, and I will show you the 8 years they spent building a newsletter, a database. I'll show you their 500 podcast episodes, right? I'll show you their 400 LinkedIn columns or their 8,000 Facebook posts about a topic. You've got to build a tribe that comes to follow you and trust you and love you, and then they will take you to their friends who are your readers. That's my advice.
Yep. If you just listen to this and you are walking, you miss some, you need to pause it, back it up, replay it again and again, because it doesn't matter if you're a self-published author, a traditional published author, even more so for traditionally published, you have to be able to show your value. And I had Brooks on my show. Brooks is as a screenwriter, because I want to talk about this. He's like, this is happening in the world of television and film. They're looking to see what audience does the creator have, because more and more, that's the way things are getting made and built.
Totally. Yeah.
I have more YouTube clients than I've had in the past, because they have subscribers, they have followers. If you have 8 million subscribers, you have a pretty good chance of doing well in your book if you position your book right.
Let me let you in on a secret. Publishers do 3 things, if you're lucky. Generally, they edit your book, they print your book, and they distribute your book. Like it goes on a truck to Barnes & Noble or Walmart or Target or Amazon. That's it. If you're lucky, they edit, they print, and they distribute. And they know that you're going to do everything else. Unless you are a superstar celebrity or the former president of the United States, they're not going to market your book. And they know this, which is why they turn everyone down, because they know that you're going to have to do all the marketing. Now, the biggest secret in publishing is most authors think the publisher is going to market it, and the publishers know they're not going to market it, and that the author has to market it. So you have to go into this eyes wide open and expect that your publisher will not do anything to market your book. You own it all. I will be on 200 podcasts to launch this parenting book. I will write hundreds of articles, digital, long form, short. I'll do dozens of radio. I'll do dozens of free keynotes just to get the word out. Right now, listen, you don't make any money in books. No one's making money. 1% of people, if even, are making money. You have to figure out why you're writing this book. If it's a business, how you're going to monetize it, usually through keynotes, derivative products, courses, seminars, things like that. But you got to think through what your why is and what your threshold is for the long game promotion and marketing of it.
Absolutely. I think I did a podcast episode long ago telling people, like, think of this. So somewhere in the beginning, traditional published authors and self-published authors have a very similar run. Like there's 300 or 400 books that get sold in the beginning, and there's so much excitement because just on sheer will, a self-published author with not a plan will sell that many books. But what happens over time is, if you're a traditionally published author, maybe you have a royalty over your head, advance you have to pay back. So you have motivation.
Right.
If you're ever going to see anything else. But also you have this sense of, if I don't, my book won't sell, which is true. It'll stop selling. So what I tell authors, like, you don't play the long game. Doesn't matter if you're a self-published, traditionally published author, your book won't continue to sell. You have to be committed to it. If the marketing died 3 months into it because someone got sick in your family, good, start again. Like, there is nothing you can do to say it's too late, or there's nothing that you could expect a publisher to do to rescue your book because you didn't give it the attention. That's on you. That's your thing.
Azul, amen. Like you, I host a very successful leadership podcast. And, there's a reason why my most frequent guests are John Maxwell, Jack Canfield, John Gray, right? Men Are From Mars. The biggest best-selling authors of our generation, they're still out there doing the podcast, not because of their ego, but because they've got to keep the marketing going. Tony Robbins and Liz Wiseman and Seth Godin and Dan Pink, they'll go out and do 100 podcasts. I mean, I just interviewed Mel Robbins last week, right? Or 2 weeks ago. She has the #1 podcast in the world, #1 book. And Mel Robbins is still appearing. I interviewed Melinda Gates, right? One of the 8th wealthiest women in the world. And she has a book and she's got to promote it. So if Seth Godin can go do 140 podcasts, if Melinda Gates can go do 100 podcasts, you need to do 400 or whatever your version of podcasts are to keep the interest going.
Yep. You have to care so much about your book that you carry them around and you find someone to go, oh, you know what? I have a book for you.
Totally. Oh my gosh. I don't want to hijack your podcast, but I actually produced or published this book myself. I have books that are published with Simon & Schuster and HarperCollins and Mango and Baker and Ben Bella. I chose to self-publish this one through Ingram Spark because that's my competence and my expertise. And, I've got, 800 books sitting in my garage because I want to have them to seed them out at like everywhere I go so people can know about it and then buy it for their Kiwanis Club or their book, reading group or you name it, because otherwise it's hard to break out. Self-publishing has democratized publishing. And yeah. I was interviewing the CEO of Barnes & Noble a few weeks ago. It's amazing. Less than 1% of all books published ever make it into a Barnes & Noble store. And so you've got to be able to break through the clutter and find out, what is your unique message and how do you find your people? Because it's hard to find authors now.
Yeah, you're so right. I had the CEO of Chicken Soup for the Soul who bought it from Jack Canfield.
Oh, interesting.
And we had the same conversation about returns. She goes, oh my God, returns are the banes of my existence. I'm like, uh-huh. Yep. Returns. Even if you have this huge portfolio of books, that's still the #1 thing she's worried about. Like returns cost you so much more than selling books.
Yeah.
So you have to manage these things.
For your listeners, returns meaning, Barnes & Noble or Books A Million buys 600 books and they sell 400 and they ship 200 back to the publisher, right? Mm-hmm. And that credit goes against your advance in a negative way. And a third of them are damaged. They can't do anything with them, right?
Yeah, they can't do anything with them. And if you are using, Ingram or something, they just ship them to you. They go, here, we can't sell these again. So you're like, but it's a perfectly good book. Nope. Right. So all these things, these things, if you don't think like a business owner for your book and you're not caring enough about this message, you aren't willing to carry books around in your car or talk to strangers or create a t-shirt with your or a YouTube channel or whatever it is, don't expect anyone else to do it.
On that point, I have been accused of being too self-promotional. It's usually by people who are jealous of my courage and my vision. And my response always is, well, if I don't believe in myself, why would I expect you to believe in me? And so I don't even, like when someone says the word self-promotional, I don't even know what that means. Listen, I guess I do, right? I try to be abundant. Like you have a podcast. I shine my spotlight on thousands of people and I believe in myself. As an author, you have to believe in yourself. Now, I surround myself with great advisors. This book was edited 8 times, right? It's probably longer than it needs to be. It's probably more self-righteous than it needs to be. It's a memoir of sorts. But I believe in me and I believe in its value. And I almost have an impenetrable shell, right? I don't believe in having thick skin. Because to quote Viola Davis, with thick skin, nothing gets in, but nothing gets out. Her advice is have transparent skin, translucent skin. Stuff comes in, stuff comes out, and you keep what's valuable. Some of the best advice I can give to authors. Believe in yourself at the darkest times.
Yes, absolutely. I went to a book I don't go to a lot of book festivals, but I'm like, hey, I'm going to go somewhere. I'm going to just sell books. That's how I get excited. If I get in, it costs me nothing or a few $100s. Maybe I'll go sell some books. At least I'll cause a ruckus, use it for social media.
Yeah.
But I went to a book festival and there's authors sitting there and they're just sitting there. I'm like, I got up and said, hey, you want to go? I was like, come over here. Listen, hey, I sold more books. My husband and I sell more books probably than most people around us because they were just waiting for people to come to them. Like,
totally. Yeah.
So
you got to be your own biggest champion.
You really do. And you have to be courageous before you write the book and definitely more so afterwards. Yeah. One of the things I notice, I mean, you could tell me, because you represent lots of authors, what would you hope from your authors, maybe because they're not listening in, but my authors are, what advice or what would you want from your authors that they're on your literary list, and more than anything, if they would just do these couple of things, boy, it would really make a difference.
Yeah. I think some pragmatism is important, right? I mean, I love authors that have vision and creativity and excitement, but I think, calibrating expectations is important, right? Ground yourself in reality, but, reach for the stars, but recognize that it's a tough industry. It's just very tough. Book sales are robust. I mean, there's more books being sold now than ever in history. Audio is on a steep upswing. Print is strong but flat. Digital is down. So one is just, understand the business and be pragmatic about the economics of it as well. Yeah. Second is try everything, reinvent yourself, repivot. Failure is the way to success. It sounds like a cliche, but fail your way to success. Go do a Barnes & Noble book signing. Go do a Costco book signing. I don't think there are anymore, right? Have your own launch party virtually. Give your book out at restaurants. Try everything. Believe in yourself. Try TikTok. Try Instagram. Go give 15 keynotes for free. I've done more. I have a big keynoting business for myself, but I have to go out and speak to some big audiences if I think actually will result in opportunities. I would say to authors, whenever I onboard someone Azul as an agent, and I'm an agent, I probably get 50 inbound inquiries a week. I'm only a nonfiction agent. Mm-hmm. My first question is, why did you write the book? I don't care why. I just want to know, do you know your why? Yeah. And if they say, well, yes, it's because I want to, I want to help people solve this and this problem, and I want to monetize it through 60 keynotes and 4 LinkedIn learning courses, and I'm going to be on Udemy, I'm going to create this, and I'm like, wow, this is great. You know how to monetize a book. Because most people don't know how to monetize their own intellectual property. Right. And that also depends on, or that predicates how you choose a publisher. Do you self-publish? Do you hybrid publish? Do you bespoke publish? And so I would say get clear what your why is. And there's no shame. No one should change your why, but you should get clear on, why am I writing this book and what is my plan for it? And then go out and shake the trees like never before. You can see behind me, I've authored 8 books on leadership, marketing, parenting, mentorship, careers. I'm writing a new book on interpersonal skills and power skills. I'm still doing podcasts and keynotes on all 8 books over 6 years.
Yeah. That's the thing I try to tell, authors is, look, whether you do any of these paths, traditional publish, self-publish, somewhere in between, that you have to understand that the revenue isn't selling the widget. Yes, long-term, you're selling a book for $16.95, but think of how many you have to sell for it to even be profitable. But if you think of a book as it's the launching point for the other things that a book will bring.
Totally.
Speaking, I can make more money in one day speaking than I might make in a book's revenue all year. Totally. Why wouldn't I do that? Why would I resist? Well, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be an author. I'm like, oh, that's why this is called Authors Who Lead, because I love everybody wanting to write a book. But after a while, it became really frustrating when they're like, yeah, but it's okay if no one buys it. I'm like, oh God, no, that is not okay. That's a lot of work. If you just want to help somebody, go across the street and help your neighbor. But if you really, books are different beast. And I think they have a more implicit sense of value to the world than other things, like even more than a podcast, because we've had them around for centuries. We know what a book is.
Well, it's interesting. I could not agree with you more, right? Plus, if you write poorly, it brings the industry down. That kind of is, altruistic. But books, I'm super passionate. I'm a stutterer. I have a lifelong speech impediment. I write about it in many of my books, and it's the reason why I've only seen like 6 movies in my life. I don't watch television. I don't listen to more than 3 or 4 podcasts, because how I learn is through reading. My vocabulary expands through reading. And so I had to have a big vocabulary to overcome this stutter that I've been afflicted with for 49 years, or however long I've been speaking, more than that. And so you want to change someone's life? Man, write a book that they say, oh my gosh, this book was written for me, or oh my gosh, they wrote my book, right? And that it really speaks to them. And I'll tell you, most books, quite frankly, are nugget books. This book, Parenting, Wrong Turns, Right Lessons, 104,000 words. Here's how this book's going to have an impact. Someone's going to read 3 sentences and say, oh my gosh, I should go do that. 3 sentences out of the whole book. And that 3 sentences is gonna situationally meet them where they are with their teen, with their infant, with their adult child, as a grandfather, as a foster child or foster parent. That's how most books are, right? Is you find a nugget and it can change your life if you reread it and then say, oh, wow, I need to go do that. I was reading a manuscript a week ago from an Australian author that I represent. The book is very much the basic principles of success, like a basic book. But it was a return to basics. And it was just one line in there about your clarity on your mission as an entrepreneur. The most simplest thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I'm doing none of it at the level I want to. I please people. I'm saying yes to too much. And that one line in that book is going to transform my company's success and my partner's success in the next 6 to 8 months.
Yeah. I always thank you for sharing that, because I always tell authors that the book, I know it's lots of words, but books aren't words. Books are messages that words are trying to contain so that someone could absorb them and share them. Books that get talked about are better than books that get read. And the reason I say that is because if I can quote a book or share how it helped me, then that book has now become invaluable. If I read the book but did nothing with it, if I read that book and didn't finish it and didn't take anything away, then it becomes just words. But a book with a message, whether it's in multiple places in a book or in one spot that I can then move out of me into someone else or some other space, that's what to me is the resonance of a book. The depth and complexity of a book isn't about that I read all this and on chapter 6, page 1, line 3, it said this. It's, wow, when I read this, it moved me. Just like you said. And I think I want more authors to not get caught up in how good their book is. That's like saying how good you are. Like you're only who you are. You could edit it well. It can be, done professionally. I'm not saying don't let it be published well, but you don't be overly worried that somehow you have to sound like someone else for your book to resonate with somebody.
I love this. I think about what was in my first book. I think it was maybe 7 years ago, Management Mess. I probably would be horrified to read that book right now. But that's where I was at that point of my life. And the book did well and it changed lots of people's leadership style. And hopefully I've written better since then. But to your point, the books that are, I read a book about 3 weeks ago called The In-Between. It was a book written by a hospice nurse about end-of-life experiences with, I think, 12 patients. And I have bought and recommended more copies of that book in the last 3 weeks than any book in the last 2 because it just struck me. And no one in my life is near death. I'm not even in that circumstance yet, but I saw it on a shelf in a Barnes & Noble. I looked at it. I'd heard about it online and through social media, and I bought it. No one in my life needs hospice right now. But I learned I've probably bought 7 copies of that book in 3 weeks. I've recommended it to countless people on every conversation. Like, I'm her best agent. I've never met her. And actually, can I tell you, it isn't even a geniusly written book. It's a good written book. It's just, it touched me in a way. This is not like, a Pulitzer Prize winning author. But she poured her heart out into it, and it was a great value to me. And here I am evangelizing her book for you, and I'm sure I'm one of hundreds of thousands who are talking about her book.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's more valuable than you worrying about hiding away to make it good. My first book, I have the same thing. I didn't have any idea that it would make a difference to anybody's life. It made a difference for me, and that's why I wrote it. That was my why. My why was I'm a school teacher. I was a principal. I was a professor, and I'm sitting on the floor thinking I tell kids they can do anything they want, and I'm not doing it. So I'm the hypocrite.
Yes.
And one of my students called me out, and so I was like, okay, well, it's time. So that's why I wrote that book. My why is important, but it's changed everything into my career. I gave up my whole traditional career. That's why I think that people miss the point. So when we're talking about books like Parenting Wrong Turns, Right Lessons, what advice would you give a writer who's got some ideas, but they're reluctant to take action?
Well, I'm a visual learner. I think everyone's, unless you have a sight impediment, everyone's a visual learner to some extent. So I tend to be very old school, right? I'm 57, almost 56, but I like to, use paper and notes. And so whenever I write a book, I start putting ideas up on my wall. Like I'm taping them up on the wall. Post-it notes tend to fall down. So I tend to put paper up or whiteboard, and I start to write out my ideas. And I may have, 10 ideas, and those may be chapters, those may be sections, those may be content pieces, but I tend to organize and architect my book up on a physical wall. And I move things around and I cross things out and I look at it and I stare and I keep paper with me, index cards. I tape them like I take tape off a tape dispenser and I tape it up on the wall and say, oh, you know what? Actually, these three things actually have a similar organization. That's a chapter. Oh, wait a minute. That's the same idea. That's going in the garbage can. And so I am a real strong advocate to get it out. Get it visually somewhere, on your floor, on a dining room table, on a wall. Move things around and start to say, okay, so I've got 40 ideas up there. If that had to be 10 chapters, what would the chapters be? Then get your chapter titles kind of together. Who cares how they're named? Just like, what's the big idea of the chapter? And then I say, okay, so should they be organized into sections? Yeah, that's kind of all about this, and that's kind of all about that. And so I am a unabashed evangelist for the visualization of getting it out and just start writing. And just pick a topic. It doesn't have to be chapter one. Just say, you know what? I want to write a book about, organic eating. And quite frankly, I don't know where to start. So I'm going to write about tomatoes and just start writing about tomatoes and what kind of tomatoes you like and why. Just start anywhere, go everywhere. By the way, I think shorter books are in. You'd be surprised. I think books that are under 35,000 words you can read in 2.5 hours on a flight from Miami to Houston are really in right now with the attention span. So I actually think you can write a book that's shorter, that has so much more valuable than a book that was bought by a publisher with a 55,000 word requirement. And therefore, that's why the last half of all books are never read, because the author has signed up for a word count and they're done by 35,000 words and the reader can read it. You should write until you are done and then finish. Don't write for some arbitrary word count.
Yes, more of that, please, Scott. I'm glad we're talking because I don't think we discussed our process last time. I use a very similar process. I'm old school. I do a visual map. I don't even use words to begin with. I'm just going to draw this. Like I want fewer words. I want to have images that capture what I'm thinking, but not be committed to it yet. Because what if this doesn't mean anything? So I might draw a little schoolhouse and go, what the hell does that mean? I don't know. And whatever comes out. And then I go, okay, well, God, what is this? Can I explain this? Hey, come in here, Steve. Let me explain this to you. And then I'll talk about it. Like, well, I don't really like. And then some go away. And then I take those and I turn them into words. I go, if they're words, then what would they say? And I start pulling ideas. And I do the same thing. I'm not writing chapter one. I'm writing this one because it gets my attention.
Yeah.
Because I thought this had my attention. I thought the book was this, but now that I very much old school, and it's how I teach my students, my adult students, my professors and lawyers. They're like, oh, I want an outline. I go, an outline is the death of your book because you're assuming you know where you're going on a family vacation and how it's all going to turn out perfectly because you planned it out. Books have a different method for showing up for me.
It's good advice. I think people get stuck. Authors get stuck on where to start. You have to be able to kind of see what it looks like. I'm not an artist in that form, so I can't draw as well as I can move things around and visualize and say, gosh, that seems like a lot, or those are the same concepts. Move those together. I'll tell you, when in doubt, cut it out. It's a great metaphor, or at least whatever adage. Less is more in writing. Some of the most profound books are the books that have the fewest words, but they have an illustration that helps you bring it to life.
Yeah.
There's no wrong. There's no wrong.
I'm thinking so differently about books these days because of the way that the attention of our readers have shifted.
Yes.
And I tell, and maybe I'm wrong. I said, think of publishing as an old school thing that's still here now. They wanted an inch worth of space on the shelf, so they want to make sure your book was 50,000 words. So they get an inch worth of real estate. That's it.
It's true. It's true. As I look back, most of if you look at this book I published last, it's called Career on Course, right? Published by Baker. It was in all the Barnes and Nobles and Books and Millions at airports and such. It was a small book, right? It actually did quite well for careers. I honestly, I can't defend why I created a 104,000 word book, but it flowed because it's such a personal topic and so many stories. And I had a co-author, right? So Thatcher wrote 60,000 words. But I do think I will not write a book this big again, because I do think it's a gift to your reader to say, hey, I can say it in 2.5 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we have to pay attention to. It's better to write three, to me, and maybe you'll disagree, and that's fine. 3 books, a volume, like 3 different books that could have been one, because I might read all 3 of them like that versus am I reading this whole thing?
It's true. Well said.
Something else has my attention already. So if I didn't finish it by now,
yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, yes. Think of all the #1 books, best-selling New York Times books that people bought and put on their bedstand and read part of one of them, so they just didn't sound dumb. Like, I just
next topic. Indicted, implicated.
abort. Yeah, but at least be reasonable and at least trust your own habits and go, okay, so how can I hook them in this, that it means something to them, even if they don't read all of this? That's the hard part for, not like, if they don't read all of this, will this impact them still?
Azul, as an author, it's hard to see your editor cross through things, right? I mean, this book, Parenting, Wrong Turns, Right Lessons, it landed at 104,000 words. It was bigger. And so I hired editors to help me edit it. And they come back and they'd say, yeah, you don't need this story. And they would cross out 15 lines. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, that doesn't add any value. It just distracted me. And then 2 pages later, they'd cross out, half of a whole, they'd say, like, Scott, it's distracting from the point. Like, no, that's fine. And the best part of that whole process was me saying, okay, take it out. Because you know what? One day later, you're never going to miss it. And the reader's never going to miss it if it takes away from the big point. So thinning your book out. You ought to argue your book should be as small as necessary, right?
Yeah, I'm 100%. I just read
from the guy who just published 104,000 words.
Yeah. Exactly. Do as I say, not as I do. What I noticed is, like, I re-picked up Strunk and White. I have that book, given to me in high school, in college, and I bought it. I was like, you know what? It's the shortest book I love because it's so precise about what it's teaching, and it's doing exactly what it says. And then I've been reading Charlotte's Web. I was like, let's see if E.B. can hold up E.B. White's work. And it does. He's so concise, gets rid of unnecessary words.
Next topic, please. I'm uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable. What I noticed, though, is that as we're writing books, a lot of books will end up as they start as idea and they burn out. They don't hold my attention long enough to continue. They were exciting. And sometimes I struggle letting go, like the death grip. Like, sometimes I just need to let go and then return to them. What happens when you get a book idea that you can't let go of, but you should?
I thought you were going to go a different direction. I was going to say, market your book to Catholics because they have a lot of guilt, and so they'll stick with your book as long as possible. I know because I'm one. So make sure your audience is a big Catholic group. Gosh, that's a great question. I'll tell you, the books that I am selling as an agent to publisher are on more and more narrow topics. The more narrow, the better, right? People that buy RVs and rent them for profit, right? People that have gastroenterology issues. I'm making these up, right? Like arcane, narrow topics. So narrow but deep audience. Those are the books that are actually doing well, that publishers are buying, right? Books on how to be a better communicator, but diffusing conflict, or exploring your origin story, or the mistakes that entrepreneurs in the AI realm. I meant like nuanced topics. And so I would say resist the temptation to write broadly and write more narrowly. Like maybe my book should be called Parenting, boys under the age of 18, because this really is a book for dads and sons. The lessons are ubiquitous, but generally it's a book for dads and sons. And maybe it should have, been titled, raising boys by a boy or something like that, right?
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? You learn so much more about the book when you're done writing it. Like, huh?
Yeah.
Well, here it
Yeah.
is. But if you don't write the first one and then a second one, you won't know. And so you've got to be committed to this. Are you an author or are you somebody who was a hobbyist? And there's nothing wrong with being a hobbyist. And you write a book for fun, and that's great. But if you're going to be a writer and you're going to use writing as your profession or one of the things you're going to stand on, you're going to have to be committed to this process of iteration.
And there's also a fine art of soliciting feedback. I do not let anyone who likes me edit my books because I want their truth, right? I want people who don't like me, who find me annoying, who generally don't like me. Honest to God, they don't know I picked them for that, but I don't have sycophants read my books. Oh, it's so good. Oh, you're a bit. No, you're just kissing my you know what, right? But I'd like to get feedback. I just want to take it from people who generally aren't inclined to be deferential to me. And then once I see their feedback, I'll write, okay, so is that about them or is that about me? Is that about their ex-husband who sounds like me, or is that about how they feel about my writing? And so I have to be very judicious on how I'm going to apply that feedback. But I do not think you should give your book to your friends to read and review. Hire someone and pay them who is agnostic, who comes to it with indifference. And they can simply say, you paid me. And by the way, you should know, for those of you who buy this book, I spent $25,000 hiring an editor to tear me apart, to re-architect, to say that's way too long, and basically humiliated me in private, right? They had my best interest at heart, but I paid them not to validate me.
Yeah. That's the hardest thing to do for someone, for sure, because you risk the relationship. But what I have observed is books are going to make any movement, even my own. Like I have a coach for me specifically for my screenwriting because I don't know what I don't know, and I want to make sure I get pushed hard on topics. So I'll submit a pitch that's 6 to 9 words and see how it lands. And they're like, nope. I'm like, dang, I can't get 6 or 9 words to land. I think I want to write this screenplay or I'm going to sell this screenplay. They're like, if you can't nail this, it's not. They'll tell apart the whole rest of your movie. So I think writing we could get really. I think maybe it's schooling. I always say that writing didn't teach me how to be a writer, or a school didn't teach me to be a writer. It taught me to be an editor. It taught me how to do what would get me the grade or keep out of the office or pass the class.
Yeah.
I wasn't trained to be a writer. I was trained to be an editor, so that I would say, tell me what to do, give me the assignment, and I will produce what you ask. But when you get a blank screen and it's blinking, you have anything, people really want to return to tell me what to do. So I often tell them, I can't tell you what to write about. You don't need to know how to write. You know that books are one word after the other. What you need me for is critique when you put something out there that's not vulnerable. You put something out there that seems like you're hiding. If you don't say the truth, if your voice and tone are off, those things I can critique you on. But what you have to say, I don't want to. And most people, they hide from themselves with the words being sort of like the protected shield. And I thought you did a great job here, Scott, on being vulnerable. I was like, ooh, that's a dad move. He did a dad move there. I get it. I've been a dad. I know when you do a dad move, you're trying to convince your kids of something that you really, you shouldn't be doing, but you kind of do anyways. I thought you did a great job at those things. And was I skeptical? No, but I know how parenting goes. And I really tell Thatcher that I appreciated the fact that he didn't always acquiesce to your pushbacks. And I thought, it's really interesting that, this book was so long. It was longer than I expected. I was like, this is a long book. But I was reading your commentary sometimes to get the Thatcher's. And sometimes I would go.
Yeah, you can say I suffered through your commentary to get to Thatcher's.
I kind of did, because what I did eventually is I skipped down to Thatcher's comments. And then if I were curious what he's talking about, I went back and read yours.
That's great. Mission accomplished.
But it pushed on the conversation of is parenting about a negotiation? What is this about? And that's what I was looking for. And when Wrong Turns, Right Lessons really is about what parenting is. It's the negotiation of those things. I know they're going to want to know more about you, whether it's to follow you and buy this book, Parenting Wrong Turns, Right Lessons, or to follow your work. Where should they go to learn more about you and this project?
So kind of you, Azul. Thank you. So the book just released this week in April. It's in paperback, hardcover, digital, soon to be in audio, everywhere books are sold. online. And you can visit me at scottjeffreymiller.com. And if you Google my name, I'm hard to miss. My wife says I'm overexposed, and would love it if you would read the book. And I think you did a good job of saying this book is about Thatcher's insights, right? And if you find his insights interesting, then maybe you go back and read some of mine. But we wrote this book with 30 different insights. I mean, we talk about all kinds of topics, including the talk, right? The talk. And I actually write it word for word how I gave it. I'm sure there's going to be some vitriol. I'm sure my mother passed out and fainted when she read it. That's okay. As an author, you kind of can't crave being liked. You have to go into it saying, this is my truth. This is what I'm writing. People will find it. That should. I got to help them. I got to help them find it. I need a bat signal, right? So people can find it. But otherwise, at 50, I think it's easier to write the older you are because you kind of care less what people think about you, right? There will be, there's a lot of pages of hate in the book. I don't know if you read that, but I said to my assistant, I want you to go find some hate. In 7 minutes, she came back with 11 pages of hate about me just on Reddit and YouTube. And it was 11 pages. I took 3 of them and put it in the book to show you got to be courageous, to be able to be a good parent and an author for that matter. So
yeah, thank you for putting that. Well, I didn't even discuss that. We could have had a whole conversation about that and why we chose.
I chose the clean stuff to put in.
I was going to ask that question. I don't know if this is a whole nother podcast episode. I was really shocked by that, actually.
Tell me more about that. What was your? Don't hesitate. What was your experience? Your judgment?
Because it wasn't about you. It was curiosity of putting it in there. I was like, wow, you paid to put this in there. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But I already had that sense of you when I read the book, because I was like, he's putting stuff in here that's incriminating himself before I even read Thatcher's comments. And I was like, this is great. This made sense to me. And you know what? I think what I've observed from our last interview, that you really understand where you're headed and that no one's going to deter you from that. And I think that's what it takes.
I love that. My wife might not like that validation, but you are exactly right. Including 2 more books coming up with our younger 2 sons.
Yeah, I can't wait. That we might have the whole family back on. Let's have a conversation about this book. Thank you so much, Scott, for coming back on the show. I appreciate it, and I look forward to sharing more about parenting, wrong turns, right lessons, wherever you buy books online. And thank you so much for giving us not only your authorship, but your wisdom in publishing as well.
Kind of you. Thank you for your spotlight.
Yeah.